Welcome to Financial Services What's Up?
This podcast brings together experts from the financial service world to figure out what financial market participants could and should be doing to embrace the biggest challenges and opportunities of the financial sector.
I'm Bjorn Ebert, the financial service leader at PwC Luxembourg.
And I'm Sandra Paulis, an asset management partner at PwC here in Luxembourg, and very keen to discuss our industry together. Welcome back to the Financial Services What's Up podcast, where we unravel the complexities and opportunities of the financial services sector in Luxembourg and beyond. And a warm welcome also to Bjorn.
Hi Sandra, pleasure to be back.
So today we are pleased to have Marius Pfeiffer with us. He is our ETF leader here at PwC in Luxembourg as our guest. Welcome, dear Marius.
Hello, pleased to be here.
So in this episode, we'll explore the trend of the year, which is around ETFs, whether it's active or passive ETFs. We shed some light about the US market and the world overall, and especially also the European market, so that we understand a little bit better why everyone is talking about ETFs. So, are you ready to dive into our ETF podcast?
Yes, 100%.
Good. Okay, then let's get it started. So, as I said already, it seems to be like everyone in the industry talks about it these days. And it's not only in the industry, it's also when I have discussions on a more private level, everyone is talking about ETFs. Definitely true also because we have seen the massive inflows into ETFs in 2025. So can you shed a little bit of light into the market, what's actually happening in Europe versus the US? Can you give us a few numbers?
Sure. So as you say, and I would subscribe to that, for me, ETFs are probably one of the largest trends in our industry at the moment. We've seen significant growth rates, almost 20% globally over the last 5 years. And that is compared to 6% for mutual funds. So more than 3 times as much growth in the ETF space than in mutual funds. And then there is, since a number of years, there's this new kid on the block, the active ETFs, where we see growth rates that are even more outstanding, more than almost 40% in Europe over the last 5 years and more than 50% in the US. So it is really significant growth, and that obviously leads a lot of asset managers to looking into the topic and trying to understand it and potentially following, also launching ETFs. And as you mentioned, it's really a global topic. Obviously, the US are the largest domicile. Then it's a massive topic in Europe, but also in other regions, Canada, Australia, Latin America, Asia Pacific, especially Taiwan, for example, as an emerging hothouse for ETFs. So it's really global and it's really massive growth globally.
So why is it that way? What are the reasons for such a high demand? Why is everyone turning into ETFs?
Good question. Historically, ETFs have obviously been popular for their very low cost. And that argument still holds true to some extent today. But there are other reasons as well. One, I would say, is transparency. For one, price transparency, because you have an intraday price. And secondly, portfolio transparency, because up until recently, and now there's just a little delay, but ETF promoters are obliged to publish their portfolio composition on a daily basis. So as an investor, you can clearly see on a day-to-day basis what you're investing in. And the last point is really the ease of access. With the ETFs being traded, by definition, on exchange, you can really trade in and out throughout the entire day, or the exchange opening hours at least, which we do see as this is definitely valued by investors. So these are the main reasons, in my opinion.
Mm. And you see a real trend there, Marius, I fully agree, and you describe it, globally, the trend. My perception is that, on the European level, there are 2 domiciles. It's Ireland and Luxembourg who are catering for the ETF market. So probably you give us a bit of shade of light there. How do you see that?
Exactly. So in Europe, it's Ireland and Luxembourg. And in terms of market shares, it's true to say that Ireland has by far the largest market share in terms of assets under management in Europe, with just over 70%, and Luxembourg has around 20%. But we do have more than 500 ETF sub-funds domiciled, in Luxembourg. So there is significant substance here. And especially around, we see emerging trends such as we've mentioned active ETFs, and we do also observe that these strategies in those active ETFs become ever more complex. And this is where we think Luxembourg will continue to play a very important role in that space with our background, with our experience in the active fund space.
Okay, so let's shed some light on the European market, the European ETF market that we have here. And we have seen that there are many actions actually taken over here to increase the competitiveness. I think the most prominent one is the taxe d'abonnement, so the subscription tax that has been reduced to zero. What other elements would you bring forward when we're talking about competitiveness of Luxembourg?
Indeed, so Luxembourg's been very active in recent years to increase the competitiveness. You've mentioned the subscription tax exemption for active ETFs. Then Luxembourg was the first of the two major domiciles in Europe to allow semi-transparent ETFs, so disclosure of the portfolio holdings with a delay. The CSSF has been very active with their fast track approval process for new share classes, which is not specifically targeted at ETFs, but in general, and of course also applicable to ETFs. But also in general, the feedback from the market is that approval times for new ETFs and ETF share classes are really good. So there's a lot of improvement there, which is being recognized. And just in general, the hybrid model, having the possibility to launch ETF share classes in an existing mutual fund is something that was made popular by Luxembourg and is very successfully practiced here in Luxembourg. So definitely a clear advantage also here.
Mm-hmm. So that you integrate them into active funds, actually, yeah. When we look a bit more on Luxembourg, on where we see also some growth perspective around it, I think it's more the complex strategies that you also see coming to Luxembourg. What did you hear when you were discussing with your clients?
I think yes. I think if you're an asset manager, it's always you always try to do what's in your best interest in terms of, for example, time to market, where we've seen significant success in Luxembourg, especially when the strategies were more and more complex. We've seen great success earlier this year with the launch of the first CLO ETFs in Luxembourg, which was done very quickly together with the CSSF. So these are really the strengths that Luxembourg can play out, and from an asset manager's perspective, again, where they can really benefit from some of the advantages that Luxembourg has to offer.
And Marius, jumping on that, I mean, if you have, because you have a broad view on our client base, and you had a lot of, in the last 2-3 years, you had a lot of interaction with clients and targets. And, we set there, let's say, 2 domicile in Europe, which is Ireland and Luxembourg. So what's now the strategy of the asset managers you're talking to? They focus on 1 location, 2 locations, they split between passive, active. What's now the way forward in your view?
Very good question. So active, passive, I think passive will continue to grow. Active will continue to grow faster. So we will see more and more active strategies come to the market. And in terms of domiciles, and this is what we already see in let's say with the largest, or some of the largest European ETF promoters, that they really follow a 2 domicile strategy. So they have ETFs domiciled in both Luxembourg and Ireland. And then for all new launches, it's really a decision, what is the best place to do this particular strategy right now? And I think we will continue to see plain vanilla US equity ETFs going to Ireland, which makes a lot of sense. And we will continue to see some of the more complex strategies to come to Luxembourg.
Okay. So now deep diving a little bit more on the operational point of view, because doing an ETF is a bit a different business when you are launching, I would say, a more actively managed fund. So we have the stock exchange, where the listing is actually required to be an ETF, but we also have the presence of the authorized participants. Can you give us a little bit more insights on how this is working? Where are the relevant listings that you need to have or that we observe on the market?
Yeah, so as you say, listing is definitely a must-have. By definition, the most relevant listing places in Europe are London, Xetra, and Borsa Italiana. So yeah, again, most ETFs are listed and traded there. And then you mentioned the authorized participants, which, I mean, they're really at the heart of the ETF operating model. And obviously, this is vastly different from what asset managers are, traditional asset managers are used to in the mutual fund world. So if asset managers are looking to launch ETFs, this is really the key thing. They have to figure out how to work with the authorized participants, with the portfolio composition file. And then on top of that, there's operational procedures, policies, procedures that have to be adjusted.
We have our investment fund managers, right? The market, they are thinking about it. Many of them, and I would say nearly everyone, has considered looking into the ETF space to analyze whether this is a nice to have opportunity, whether this is a must have in terms of active or passive. If some of our listeners are still considering looking into that area or not fully defined whether they want to go or not, what are the elements that they should take into consideration for taking such an important strategic decision?
Yeah, we have, as a matter of fact, we have a lot of those discussions at the moment. As you say, many asset managers are considering to enter the ETF space, to launch ETFs for the first time. And one of the first questions we ask is, or we ask them to think about the reasons why they're doing this. Is it because there's a legitimate growth case? Is it because there's legitimate investor demand to access these strategies in an ETF wrapper? Or is it just what we would call the FOMO, the fear of missing out? You see everyone else do it and you feel like there's a risk of you missing the train. So if there is a legitimate growth case, you should start thinking about whether you want to build, buy, or rent. Buy, obviously, potential decision, but if you want to build it, there's a lot of work involved in-house. It probably takes longer. The investment is a little bit bigger. There is the possibility, of course, to rent, to work with white label providers or a couple of other players, which, especially when you're envisaging a smaller scale of your ETF business, is probably reasonable approach, at least at first.
Okay, so the most relevant one after you have decided you want to go or no go is the build, buy, or rent decision, right?
Yes, then you would look at, where to domicile, and of course you have to figure the distribution out. Just launching the ETF will not allow you to sell it.
But I guess, Marius, also after this kind of decision, there's also an operational element into that. What in your view, what are the 2-3 main operational impacts you probably have or you should consider?
Say you build, you definitely need to be connected to the authorized participants. You do need a service provider, one way or another, that will provide that portfolio composition file to you. You do definitely have to figure out distribution, as I mentioned. And also there's this popular capital markets function that is mandatory when operating ETFs. So this is also something completely new that asset managers have to figure out if they do it in-house.
Yeah, you mentioned distribution now 2 times, and I think there's also a large difference in terms of investors when you look at the European market versus the US market. Yeah, from what I read in the statistics is that the European market is way more institutional investors. The US market, more retail investors. So maybe this trend is coming over, that we see also much larger part of retail investors coming into the ETFs. What's your bet on that one, Marius?
Exactly as you say. Institutional definitely predominant in Europe at the moment. Completely different picture in the US. And we strongly expect retail to be a key area of growth for the ETF industry in Europe in the coming years.
Okay. So we are coming nearly to an end. And as a last question, we always ask our guests a number that caught your attention this week or over the last months and which you would like to share with our listeners. So what is your number, Marius?
I will go with 20.3% because this is the net growth of European ETF assets under management in the first half of 2025. And 20.3%, I mean, growth by a fifth is just tremendous. So that's why that number stuck with me.
Yeah, we were talking a lot about the growth, the asset class with the best growth over this year. So let's hope that this is continuing. And I think when we're looking at the elements, this is definitely the reasons that they are there. So if, dear listeners, you are already considering launching an ETF, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We are always there to help support you. Marius, he had nearly 50 discussions with different clients. If you're not among those 50 clients, don't hesitate. Reach out to us and we are happy to help you navigate this decision. Thank you very much, Bjorn. Thank you very much, Marius.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra.
I wish all of you a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye.